In the late 1960s, a series of murders in Northern California shocked the entire country. The police were baffled, and residents turned to mystical theories to explain the crimes. But the killer, who we will discuss here, was not just a criminal. He craved recognition. He wanted to become part of the mystery. Thus, the Zodiac was born. The first murder occurred in 1959, but it was in 1968 that things took a turning point when the killer began to act more actively. His first victims were Betty Lou Jensen and her boyfriend David Faraday. Their bodies were found in the wilderness on a remote road in California. The weapon used by the killer was likely a knife and a gun, and it seemed his victims were young people enjoying the outdoors. This murder didn't immediately cause a public uproar. However, just a few months after the first incident, in 1969, he struck again, this time killing two more people, Jim and Darlene. He attacked them in the same location, on the same stretch of road. However, the pace of his crimes began to pick up at a terrifying speed, and within a couple of months, this had become a real threat to local residents. After another murder, he sent letters to two major newspapers, not only confessing to the crimes, but also presenting himself as a mysterious criminal who wanted his name to become a symbol of fear. He signed his letters as Zodiac, a name that became synonymous with his mystery and cruelty. In these letters, written in the style of puzzles, the killer claimed that he would continue to kill, and each letter contained ciphers and riddles that he threw at the police and the press. In one of these letters, he declared that he wanted to play with society, and in another, he suggested solving the puzzles to get additional clues about his crimes. But here's what puzzled everyone. The Zodiac didn't hide. He took pride in remaining in the shadows, and even after committing murders, he did everything possible to stay in the spotlight. He published letters and ciphers, and in doing so, not only did the crimes remain unsolved, but they also became part of a cultural mystery that lured people to decipher his games. After the murder of the couple Jim and Diana, which shocked the public, the Zodiac decided to take his crime to a new level. He didn't just kill, he chose to leave behind written messages, turning himself into a figure that would haunt the police and local newspapers for many years to come. The Zodiac displayed intelligence and cunning. He understood that his crimes were unlikely to be solved unless he himself played an active role in the investigation of his own identity. This wasn't just a series of murders, it was a true game with the authorities, one in which he dictated the rules. After sending his first letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, everything was set for the Zodiac to become a media sensation. The first letter, a confession and a challenge. On July 16, 1969, the Zodiac sent his first letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, which served as a confession to his crimes. But the letter included something even more sinister, a cipher made up of symbols and letter combinations that needed to be decoded. The letter was essentially a challenge. The Zodiac claimed that his goal was not just to kill, but to play with the police and the public. Written in red ink, the letter contained not only a confession, but also numbers and phrases leading into strange, mysterious directions. With this letter, the Zodiac not only confessed to two murders, he added a chilling element: threats of future killings. He stated that he would continue murdering if his identity wasn't discovered. The letters and numbers in his cipher were encoded in such a way that only he could understand them, though he believed that perhaps some ordinary person might be able to solve the puzzle. Riddles and ciphers, letters that challenged. The Zodiac didn't stop at one letter. He continued sending riddles to the press even when the police considered them useless. His second letter, sent in August 1969, was even more elaborate. It included symbols, numbers, and other elements that would require mathematical geniuses or possibly even criminals linked to the occult to decipher. With each new letter, the Zodiac further cemented his reputation as a mysterious killer who not only enjoyed murder, but also took satisfaction in evading capture. The ciphers and their decryption. One of the most famous and puzzling aspects of the Zodiac case was the ciphers he sent. Over the years, he mailed increasingly complex messages, leaving behind signs and keys that were supposed to reveal his identity. One of these ciphers, the 340-character cipher, became a true puzzle for top cryptographers and researchers. The Zodiac challenged not only the police, but also the general public. He claimed that his ciphers couldn't be cracked using standard methods and that only true geniuses could decipher them. With each message, the puzzles became more sophisticated. In one letter, he even warned that if his cipher wasn't solved within 3 days, he would begin killing again. In 1969, the San Francisco police were stunned when they received a cipher-filled letter in which the Zodiac claimed he could forge any evidence and hide his identity completely. It soon became clear that his ciphers weren't just random symbols. They were logical riddles containing clues that required attention and deep knowledge. Despite all efforts from cryptographers, the Zodiac successfully avoided identification. A game with the public and the police. The Zodiac enjoyed this game. He challenged not only law enforcement, but everyone who tried to solve his mysteries. In one of his letters, he wrote, "I think my cipher will be so complex that I will be able to laugh at you for the rest of your lives." He kept sending letters, claiming he was playing with the police and saying he enjoyed being in the spotlight. Let me know if you'd like to make this sound more like a narration for a YouTube video. I can adapt the tone. Zodiac seemingly derived immense pleasure from being able to manipulate society and the police. He continued writing letters to newspapers and claimed he had no intention of stopping until his name was associated with mass fear. He even promised to kill more people if his ciphers weren't solved. In one of his letters, he stated, "I will continue doing this until my true face is revealed." Disappearance of leads. Fruitless search. Despite all the police's efforts, the Zodiac remained at large. The police tried to match evidence, interrogate witnesses, but each time the Zodiac outplayed them. His letters became increasingly confusing, and no new information brought the investigation any closer to solving the case. The criminal continued to skillfully manipulate the investigation, and his mysterious identity remained hidden. At this point, the murders committed by the Zodiac became more frequent and his behavior even more twisted. After his first few crimes, which had already shocked the public, the Zodiac continued to kill, refining his tactics and methods of communication with both the police and the press. His crimes not only remained unsolved, but became part of a sinister game, where he was the central figure and the police and journalists were his opponents. The Santa Rosa Murder, 1969, a new approach in his methods. In December 1969, several months after his last known killing, the Zodiac struck again. His next victims were Brian Harbin and Lori Reddick in the city of Santa Rosa, located north of San Francisco. This case became a clear example of how the Zodiac adapted and refined his methods with each murder. The victims were sitting in a car when the killer approached from behind and opened fire, then ordered them to get out of the vehicle and follow his commands. This time, however, the Zodiac was not just a brutal killer. He became a kidnapper as well, taking the lives of his victims and leaving behind unusual messages. After this murder, the Zodiac sent a letter to the press containing threats and claiming he enjoyed killing and intended to continue. The Sylvester Murders, 1970, strengthening his mythic persona. In January 1970, in the town of Sylvester, a suburb of San Francisco, the Zodiac committed yet another murder. This time, the victim was Paul Stein, a young man who appeared to be a random target. The Zodiac didn't stop at murder. He continued playing games with the authorities, sending a letter to a newspaper claiming responsibility for the killing. His letters became increasingly threatening and cryptic. He not only described his crimes, but also included coded messages that continued to puzzle both police and cryptography experts. In one letter, the Zodiac proudly declared he would not stop until he had killed 37 people. His thirst for control and dominance in the criminal world was becoming more apparent. Mystical messages and threats. Zodiac in search of recognition. The Zodiac continued to send mysterious ciphers and letters to newspapers, which not only boasted of his accomplishments, but also contained chilling threats about the future. His letters carried not only straightforward danger, but also enigmatic phrases that were impossible to ignore. The Zodiac also repeatedly claimed he would use deadly tools to continue his killing spree. He stated that he enjoyed watching society tremble in fear, seeing people avoid going out at night, and knowing that his trail remained unsolved. Press reaction and the investigation. While the Zodiac continued his deadly game, the police investigation yielded no results. Authorities increasingly came to the conclusion that the Zodiac wasn't just a random criminal, but someone who meticulously covered his tracks. The killer employed well-planned tactics to avoid capture. Investigators discovered that every murder he committed bore deliberate and calculated signs, as if the Zodiac was not only a murderer, but someone determined to disappear while keeping society in a state of terror. The letters he sent included both threats and new ciphers, which further complicated the investigation. Some of these ciphers were so complex that they took years to decode. One of the most mysterious and dangerous criminals in the history of the United States, became not only a symbol of fear, but also an object of endless research and theories. His disappearance in the early 1970s left many questions that remain unanswered to this day. But how did such an intelligent and calculating maniac disappear, leaving only ciphers and letters filled with threats and mysteries behind? The disappearance of the Zodiac. Why did he stop killing? After the murder of Paul Stein in 1969, the Zodiac disappeared from the public eye for several years. The crime stopped, and his letters became rare. The police, of course, continued their search, but their efforts yielded no significant results. Theories about the Zodiac's disappearance vary. Some experts believe he could have been one of the following. 1. He died. Some believe that the maniac might have died in an accident, fallen victim to another crime, or even committed suicide. However, this is unlikely because many believe the Zodiac was too cunning to just disappear like that. 2. He stopped killing. There's a theory that the Zodiac simply lost interest in murders. Perhaps he no longer found satisfaction in committing these crimes and decided to fade into the background, living as an ordinary person. 3. He continued to hide. According to other theories, the Zodiac continued his activities, but in a more hidden form. Perhaps he continued to kill, but did so more covertly, without attracting media attention. Letters and ciphers. Unsolved mysteries. One of the strangest and most mysterious aspects of the Zodiac case was his ciphers and letters, which remained unsolved for decades. He not only wrote blatant confessions to the murders, but also created puzzles that fascinated the minds of many generations of researchers and cryptographers. The most famous of these was the 340-character cipher, which was eventually decoded only in 2020, more than 50 years later. Unfortunately, the letters the Zodiac left in the press contained no direct clues to his identity, though some ciphers were decoded, revealing phrases like, "I enjoy killing," and "I have no remorse." However, the key to fully unraveling his identity has never been found. Consequences of the Zodiac case. Legacy of fear. The Zodiac had a profound impact on society at the time. His crimes became a symbol of uncertainty and fear. He played with people, with the police, and with the media, making everyone participate in his game, while he remained beyond their reach. His actions reflected a fear not only caused by the acts of violence themselves, but also by the fact that he was elusive. His influence permeated culture and media, inspiring films, books, and even TV series. The Zodiac's mystery became part of American mythology, and his actions became a representation of how one person could lead an entire society into a state of anxiety and panic. The horror and reverence for his personal secret made his name synonymous with mystique and enigma. Theories about the Zodiac's identity. Although the Zodiac left behind many mysteries, his identity remains unknown to this day. Over the decades, many theories have been proposed about who he might have been. Names of different people have been suggested, ranging from psychopaths to police officers, or even journalists who might have intentionally provoked the investigation. However, none of these theories have been proven.